of page Kuf Dalit, you have the
Yeah.
Vatam al zeh shebiyom chaf vav bekislev lo chidshu davar. This is exactly where we left off in our review. Why did they not enact something new on the 26th? Right? Because we understood why they didn't enact anything on the 24th, because primarily we're just celebrating our avoda. Until our avoda sort of reached its completion, that Hashem made a yichudi law out of it on the 25th, we don't celebrate. But if the whole point is that we're getting to the supernatural on the 26th, then why don't we add something? And that was one of the original questions. So he says, "Who can move about Maimer?" This is what the Friedrich Rebbe already alluded to this in his Maimer. At the end, because really we can't quite celebrate that level yet. In other words, it came into the world temporarily that year. But that type of reality, to make like a full-blown holiday on it, we plan to do so when Mashiach comes. Because we don't have the real level of Havai de La'ela in the world until the future. And that's the idea of why Chanuka is a messianic holiday. It says the Kinu Shel Mos Mashiach Shel Ches Nimi. The harp of Mashiach will be 8 strings. So there's 2 ways of, I don't know if there's really 2 ways of understanding this. I always creatively understood this in 2 ways. I saw it somewhere at one point. I don't know if it was from a legit source or not. But there's the idea that you have 7 strings versus 8 strings. It's kind of like a simple thing. But then there's also this whole other idea that, the scale of music, most scales are basically 7 note scales. So the whole idea that there's like the Mashiach's music will be like of an 8-note scales, like the whole concept of music will be, which actually makes more sense if you think like, what's the big deal? Mashiach has another string on his harp. It's something totally different, where like there's a level 8 taking place, and it's Havai de La'ela, which is completely supernatural. So like music itself will take on like another dimension.
But can't we literally just take from like the Seder Hishtalsos, the example that he gives us, where like the keter of one world is from the malchus of the other world. It doesn't necessarily rearrange the world. It's just like the beginning of the next scale starts.
Exactly, because it's like, I think that you can go from like one scale to the next, and it's like the 8th is actually the first of the next one. But here
it's just, but then you have 2 then you have 2 of the same starts, because you have like 1/8. The 8th one is the first, which is the same as the
first. But that would just, all that would do for you on an actual instrument is just like give you like 1 note higher.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, okay, Mashiach, I can play like a C sharp. It's like not that big of a deal. Whatever, it's just a thought.
Not impressed.
It's just a thought. Okay, Masha Ein Kain, right? Beis HaMikdash, in the temple, unlike Mashiach's time, in the temple, we know that, yes, they had the Shem Havaya revealed in the temple, but only the lower name Havaya, right? And that's the Havaya that's connected with the Yishtalshlus. That's why there was only 7 branches on the menorah, and that's why it could be destroyed, because that level of Havaya because it's limited, it can also be concealed, right? And so that's why, remember, we were saying last night, you have to keep it on the right side. Because if you take a light which is subject to limitations, you put it on the left side, the left will gobble it up. Unless you're an 8-level light, in which case you can put it on the left side, like the Chanuka menorah. Right? So in the temple, they didn't have the level of the 8, and therefore they only had the lower level of Havaya. And that's why the harp in the temple was a 7-stringed harp. Right? Simple as that. And the revelation that did take place in the time of the Chashmonoim, where there was an additional lights coming out of 1 jar of oil, like a mamash supernatural completely. Yes, it happened, but it was only that one moment in time, right? B'shana Shabbat Hayanes, in that year that the miracle happened, l'chein lo kava mechav vav kislev yichadshu eizadavar. Therefore, they couldn't bring themselves to basically make a full-blown holiday out of it on the 26th, because it's not something that you can sort of repeat throughout the ages in such a grandiose way. Now, the truth is, we don't want to sort of totally limit ourselves. I think the idea is that even though we're talking about it in Maimarim, and the fact that it did happen in history means to a certain degree, Hanukkah does contain the potentiality for that light, and therefore it is an 8-day holiday, and therefore it's a messianic holiday. But to mamash go ahead and say we're going to celebrate that miracle and like boldly say that we could just like access that level, it's too much until Mashiach comes, apparently. Since we are we started just with a little tiny bit left. Why don't we take a deep dive into this footnote 42? This gives us some more meat and potatoes to look at. It's a long one. You ready? See the bottom of the page there?
Yep.
And seemingly it comes with all kinds of footnotes on the footnotes. So we've got our work cut out for us here. He says, and I didn't look at it yet, so it's triple work. He says, "Masha madlikim ben Chanuka ches neros, mitzad zeh shadliku mimenu shmona yamim." So in other words, it's exactly what we just said. Wait a second, don't we kind of celebrate the reality of the 26th? Because the whole Indian is that we have an 8-day holiday for that very reason. In other words, it is noted that we are accessing the level called Yehuda Ilah. I mean, Havaya de La'ela. Ulai yesh lomer. The Rebbe says, maybe you could say. And what do we say? And the Rebbe says, maybe you could say.
You can say.
We can say. And why am I saying that? It's because the Rebbe said that about his Rebbe. In the Frierdiker Rebbe's Mimer, he says, maybe you could say. And the Rebbe literally says, when my father-in-law says, maybe you could say, for us, we could say, you can definitely say. So I think we can apply that liberally. So you can say, Shahayanes Shematzan Pachashemen, right? Kishahaya. When it occurred, the miracle that they found the jar of oil, Yadu Shemen Yadlik Shmona Yamim Ad Sheyesh Shemen Tahor. Oh wow, they knew. This is a big chiddush. When they found the jar, they knew it would last for 8 days, even before the time it would take them to find pure oil. That's I never heard that before. Sharei Svara Lomar. And why would they think such a thing?
They knew it all along.
Why would they think such a thing? When he first said it, you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Now he gives the answer, you're like, it couldn't be any other way. Because he says it's a svara. Rationally, you would think that. If they already found the jar, don't forget, we made a whole holiday for thousands of years until Mashiach comes in after, based on them finding this jar. It was a miracle, right? It wasn't supposed to find any jar. As we said many times in this class, the Greeks went out of their way through the entire city of Jerusalem to go and contaminate every single oil they could find. Finding one in the temple is a crazy miracle. So therefore, logically, they were logicking with God there.
But
They said, let me just tell you the logic, that when Hashem made this miracle, that they found the jar of oil, certainly he gave them enough time with this jar to light until they could find pure oil. And why would he give them the oil in the first place? So he knows if he's already making miracles, for sure this is going to last for 8 days. It's like a total bitachon in Hashem. Why would he make a miracle that we're going to have to go now light impure oil? He would never make. He would have not made the miracle for such a thing.
But why would we assume that the miracle is gonna enact itself by means of an unnatural way? Maybe tomorrow we're gonna find another pure vial of oil.
Hold on.
Why this vial of oil now is gonna go and last 8 days?
Maybe they.
Hello, hold on a second. Look at here. He answered. Remember I said there's footnotes on the footnotes.
Okay.
You got one of the questions. Good for you. That is a big deal. Look at the star at the bottom of the bottom of the page. He says, "Al pi zeh meturatz." According to this, we can explain Masha Hikshu al Beis Yosef. This that we actually challenged the Beis Yosef. I kind of shorted you guys. We didn't read all the footnotes during this thing, and there's tons of them. So he's having the whole discussion on the bottom of the page with himself. But he says in footnote 14, the Rebbe apparently challenged the Beis Yosef on this Indian that they divided the oil in the jar to 8 parts. They did. In other words, according to the Beis Yosef, when they found the oil, they right away divided it into 8 parts because some of them thought, we're not going to get, it's going to take us 8 days to find pure oil, so let's use this for 8 days. But those who didn't divide it into 8 parts, they were like, we don't have to because it'll last for 8 days, right? Okay, so going on, back inside the major footnote there, you see that? The Al Pizeh Yesh Lomar. Yeah, I thought you were excited about the class.
No,
but you're
no.
excited about the Sefer Yetzirah. Okay, have a donut while you're at it. All right, anyway, Al Pizeh Yesh Lomar, right? According to this, we can say, the Bezeh Shedalak Hashemen, Shmona Yamim. This that the light lasted 8 days. Shnei inyanim. There's 2 different inyanim in this. Prat ba'neis l'metzias Hashem. It is an aspect based on this chiddush that the Rebbe is saying that they found it and they're like, yeah, it's an 8-day jar, right? He says this already shows 2 inyanim. One, that the lasting for 8 days is actually a detail of the first miracle. It's not a second miracle.
Oh.
It's like, okay, we found a jar that lasts for 8 days. In other words, it's one thing, right? Okay, it's a part of the first miracle. Shebo nichlal gam sheyuchal adlik mimenu ad sheyesh shemen tar. In other words, they found a jar that they could it would last them for 8 days. They no geb as hamispar deshmona. And
How did they know it would last 8 days if it's like specifically been described through history and passed on as tradition as this jar only lasted 1 day, but it magically lasts 8 days because Hashem let it last 8 days? Like we put it in the description that it's only was supposed to last 1 day. How did they like find a jar that's supposedly only supposed to last 1 day and immediately go like 8 days?
I didn't even hear you because I'm confused about something else. Do you want to say it
Is that the
again?
question we're asking?
Wait,
Yeah.
let's just look at what is the Rebbe bothered by. Let's go back to the original question. He says, seeming that the fact that it was supposed to last 8 days contradicts what we're saying inside the Mimer. Why? I'm sorry, the fact that we have a holiday, an 8-day long holiday, seems to contradict what it says in the Mimer. Because what does it say in the Mimer? We're not celebrating the 26th because we can't celebrate the number 8 until Mashiach comes. So he said, what are you talking about? We're celebrating the number 8 the whole time, right? So he says, okay, so one way of looking at this is that we're not really celebrating the 26th because we're really what happened on the 25th is really the only thing we're celebrating because it's not it was basically
Sustaining the holiday.
yeah, it's like it was one miracle, not two. It was that they found a jar that lasted 8 days, and therefore what he says here at the end is the bezesh dalek shemen shmona yamim. I'm sorry, he says that the ein nogeh b'zeh mispar deshmona, and it doesn't matter so much the number 8. Why?
Because that's the Radlah.
No, but he's saying he's trying to point out
That's what I
that
was thinking.
he's like it
That's
just kind of happened to last 8 days because that's the time it took them to go get new olive oil. But it's not like we're celebrating the number 8 per se because we're not saying that we're accessing and making a holiday out of 8. He's trying to say that it's kind of sad actually. We're all this time excited that we're in like the middle of this holiday of 8, but he's saying no, we don't celebrate 8. The fact that it's 8 days is because they found a jar of oil that wound up it was going to take 8 days for them to get new oil, but it doesn't matter so much the number 8. That's one thing that he's saying.
It says it's a way around like not being able to celebrate this level that's above
Right.
rationality and
Right. It's annoying. I want to celebrate that.
But it's like but it's like Hashem made it so that we can celebrate it in a way where it's brought down into a number.
Totally understand
by making it take 8 days.
Yeah.
But I feel like the whole idea is that it's
that's
not,
why I said the right.
it's not
I got you.
it's not supposed to be brought down because it is 8. And then you're saying it doesn't matter, but the whole thing is literally it does not matter.
It doesn't matter.
The matter is in the 7th realm.
I don't mind because you don't matter.
Hold on. You're getting too complicated on me there. Let's just finish this point.
This works to explain what I think.
We're getting loopy.
Okay.
I'm not trying to make a fancy and play on words. Just
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But for shenaisabo neis shadliku menu shmona yamim, inyan shmona shelamayla mishtalshlus. Oh, so he says on the other hand, there's 2 inyanim here. Okay, so there's 2 inyanim he's saying. One is that it's really not so much connected with the number 8, and the second one that it is connected with the number 8. That it was an 8-day miracle. In other words,
we get a taste of Mashiach.
the main thing was just like Hashem's going to make this thing light until they get pure oil. Or you could say that it was specifically an 8-day miracle, which is something which is higher than the Ishtalshlus. You can look at it like that. According to those sort of 2 opposite concepts, we can say that when he says, he doesn't say there wasn't a revelation of the 8. He said it was just temporary. He's saying that's regarding the fact that it was an 8-day holiday. Yes, you could say that year it was an 8-day holiday. But nowadays that we light 8 candles, wow. Why do we light it? Not because we're sitting inside of like a number 8. It's because it happened to take them 8 days to get pure oil. But in other words, they're both true. The fact that it's an 8-day holiday in its origin was because they reached the level 8. but it was temporary. But there's really two inyanim. Really, you could say that the first day, the fact that it lasted for so long, was simply a matter of them being able to get pure oil, and it was not a 26th. It didn't reach, the holiday didn't reach to the 26th. That's why we don't mechadesh anything on the 26th. It was the 25th. And what was the miracle? Finding the jar that lasted until enough time came until they can get pure oil, right? Which happened to be 8, but it's not connected with the number 8.
And they lasted 8 days though.
Right, it just happened to be, right. So there's actually 2 inyanim in the right. But in that year there was a second inyan, which was in addition to the fact that they found the jar on the 25th, which could last 8 days. There was on the next day there was a revelation of a level 8 scenario. So they could actually celebrate messianic 8 reality. But for the later generations, we're actually going back and really just celebrating the 25th. That's why he says we don't machadach anything on the 26th, because we're not celebrating it for the 8 reality. We're celebrating it for the dual miracle that took place on the 25th. No introduction of the 26th, which was that they found it and it lasted long enough for them to get pure oil, not a number attached to it.
You can almost say the 25th is higher because because if it's lasting 8 days, it's like that level 26 is only in the service of the level 25. Because it's only lasting long enough so that they could find more oil. It's only being supernatural so that long enough so that they can be so that they can get it's like
do it in a natural way.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I like the idea that
it's similar to what you're saying in this final footnote that he says. What you just said. Look at the double star. Again, you're with the footnotes. You're getting nailing these footnotes. The double star at the bottom is the last footnote we'll read. Then I also want to add my 2 cents. He says, look. Lahayr shemavur la'el siv hay and vav. If you look in the Maimer in the 5th and 6th chapter, shegam hanes mitzias shem and tahor, that even the miracle of finding the pure oil, shorshu ba'asmas or intev shlemal mishtalshlus, it also is rooted in the essence of Hashem above the ishtalshlus, which is the number 8. It's just that it came in a garment. Remember we said? So in other words, what we're saying is that there is a concept that even on the 25th. Right, there is a hint to the level 8. It just doesn't come glaring through. But I want to just before we sort of wrap it up. The last chapter is very short. I want to put out something that Shimon said, which is because we have 20 minutes and we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to allow myself a little bit of a vort here. Right, there's this idea in Hasidus, and I think this is kind of also happening right here. That I'll give you an example. It says that the Chabadniki, they don't sleep in the sukkah, right? Even though in halacha it says you're supposed to sleep in a sukkah. So why don't we sleep in the sukkah? Because it says that the Mittler Rebbe spoke about this notion that the makifim of bina are shining in the sukkah, and therefore, how could you sleep in such a thing? It's like sleeping in front of God, right? It's like if you would never sleep if you knew that such a thing was happening. So the idea is that what you can't just have some Kabbalistic thing interrupting halacha. Kabbalah have to align, otherwise it's 2 Torahs chas v'shalom. So what they say is by these great tzaddikim, they can apply the law stayer pater min sukkah. Someone who's in pain is pater from being in the sukkah. So for example, for us, people like us, if it's raining really hard or it's freezing cold or you can't sleep, you're pater from being in the sukkah. You don't have to be there in dafka through pain. So for the great tzaddikim who see the makifim of bina, they're pained to sleep in such a thing, and therefore, even though it's Kabbalistic levels that arrive them at that, they're actually halachically pater from sleeping in the sukkah, because it would pain them to sleep in front of God in that way, because they can see God in that way. The question obviously is begged, well, where do we get the minhag of such simple people to not sleep in the sukkah? We don't see the makifim of bina. We're not pained. And so the Rebbe explains, and he says it's the same exact thing for why we don't eat bread in the 3rd meal. Exactly the same thing. That because the Rebbe told us of the minhag of the Rebbe, of himself, that he doesn't sleep in the sukkah, and you're like a full-blown chassid, and you would be pained to not do what your Rebbe's doing, especially when he told you that he doesn't do it, and he told you that you're going to be pained not doing what the Rebbe does. So therefore, we can't sleep in the sukkah either because we're in pain. Not from the same pain of seeing the makifim of bina, But because the tzaddikim see the makif bina, and we want to be like them, and we were told that they see it, we were told that if we're a normal person, we would be pained to not act like them, that we don't sleep in the sukkah either, because we're pained. So what comes out from all this is that we wind up grabbing onto a minhag of tzaddikim, which is not relevant to people on our level, but which somehow shared to us with through a halachic sort of loophole, which is kosher though, enabling us to practice Judaism on a higher level than we actually deserve, due to the kindness of the Rebbeim that basically figured out a way to link us into their level. Now, I think the source of that, I always talk about this, it's something that fascinates me, but it seems like Hanukkah is the source of that. According to what we're saying, we're celebrating an 8-day holiday, even though we're not touching the level of Havaya de La'ela. But because they figured out basically a way that it took them 8 days to get to oil, happenstance that they turned the holiday into an 8-day holiday, even though that year they could celebrate 8 for the right reasons, we can still celebrate 8, so to speak, for the wrong reasons. We still tap into 8.
So right.
Even though we're not on the level b'chlal of Mashiach, they gave us an avenue to Mashiach. This is what you were saying, right? It's gewaldic, man. Yeah.
But they did celebrate.
They did.
They did.
Right.
The original Hanukkah.
Okay, so the tzaddik can't sleep in the sukkah for the right reasons, but us? Okay, let's finish the mimer.
Fundamentally, it is our neshama is yearning for those reasons as well.
Fundamentally, but it's cloaked in nature,
Of course,
right?
yeah.
So if it's really cloaked in nature, we shouldn't celebrate it at all. But we're saying they gave us sort of a way that even though it's cloaked in nature, at our level, we can still do what they did. Okay, so we lost Yaakov. All right, it's only one man down. Let's keep going.
Can we say that your reasoning is the same minion to do Tikkun Chatzot, that we don't feel the pain of the destruction of the temple, but we know that deep down the tzaddikim did, and so we're doing it as a therapy to our neshama to
No, not really, because the Indian is not just that we feel the pain of the tzaddikim. The Rebbe points out very clearly that it's an Indian of his kashrus, because the Rebbe says, for example, that if you don't feel yourself very well, it's I guess it's similar, but the difference is that we never were told that by the Rebbe, and that's a big difference, because the Rebbe says I do it, and therefore any chassid who knows that would be in pain not doing it. Boom, that's what we need to hear. That's the piece that we need to hear. If we don't hear that, then what shaykhs do I have to levels of tzaddikim? Right? No, of course I shouldn't say tikkun chatzot if I don't feel sad. I mean, in theory, adrabah. It's not just like if I didn't hear this word, for sure I said sleep in the sukkah. Who told you not to? It's not that man made up this thing that, I feel pain because I'm connected with the tzaddikim. It's because the Rebbe told us that if you want to be connected with me, you would feel pain if not doing this, right? So that opened up the reality that, oh my gosh, I feel pain. I actually feel pain because it severs my connection with the tzaddik. If the tzaddik didn't tell me that that's something that should sever my connection with him, then why should I feel automatically have the rights to do what he does? There's many things the Rebbe does that he never told us that, and he also never told us that it's his minhag, and therefore you should feel it's unique things that he sort of gave us an avenue into. So I don't think you can definitely not broadly apply that concept. All right, to wrap up the mimer. V'hiratzon, may it be Hashem's will. Look at it, ends in chapter 8, right there. All right, may it be Hashem's will. She'ikuyam banu inyan zeh. That it should be fulfilled in us, this inyan, that Hashem stood for us at our time of pain. Amen. Like it says in the Allah Nisim prayer. The Kyle Klalus inyan gullus. It really refers to the whole concept of gullus. The gullus is much bigger pain than whatever little wars they happen to be going through. The whole gullus is basically stand for us at the time of our need. At the time of our pain. Even though the Rebbe says here, we've already underwent all of these shmados. Shmados is like major open calamities of decrees against the Jews, right? And destruction. And he says there won't be any more. As the Mittler Rebbe said, "V'lo takum pa'mayim tzara chas v'shalom." He's like, there's this notion. The Rebbe is basically saying here, the Holocaust is not going to happen again, right? He kind of hints to this a lot because people are scared. If this happened before, it could happen again. He says, no, there's a promise. We're not going to see that level of destruction again. It's already sufficient what we've already gone through. Va'achshav hakol hu b'tov, and from now on, everything's going to be positivity, good. Va'adraba od bizman ha'galus miskayim kol echad v'echad miYisrael. Even during galus, it's going to be fulfilled by every Jew. It says, "Hayu malachim munayich, v'serosehem mnikiosayich." There's a pasuk in Yeshaya that says that the kings and the ministers are going to be like our wet nurses, and they're going to attend to us and serve us. He's saying that this is a messianic promise, which we will see fulfilled even before Mashiach comes, that the Goyim are going to start basically serving our needs, which to a large degree we can already see that. Simply the fact that we are receiving like billions and billions and billions of dollars like every year from Goyim to protect the Jewish people, right? That's not like something that ever happened in the history of humanity before. And that's just one small thing. The reality is that every city in America has passed laws throughout the Rebbe's reign, starting in the 80s, that we can demonstrate our menorah in the public square, which there was wars and battles about that. And we had to hire like special legal teams. Nat Lewin was like, I think he was like the man for the job. He was kind of like the Rebbe's lawyer, and he had to create a whole defense, but they went for it. Like there's almost no place in America anymore that they're stopping us. On the contrary, they defend our rights to do it. They'll send out the police force so a Yid can come light his menorah in the public square. That's mamish them coming to our aid. They're defending our religion for us, right? So, and it's again just one small example. It's happening like broadly across the world, right? I mean, even to the degree that we just saw, like in the news, there was this big star that came out with anti-Semitic remarks, right? And the world just like shut him down. They're like, sorry, you're done, right? Like that's the opposite of what happened in the past. Just in 1940s, 30s, when someone gets up and has the guts and the craziness to start speaking like virulent anti-Semitism, everyone gets excited. They're like, yes, where you been all my life? Like, let's kill them all. And that's what they try to do, right? And all of a sudden, when the guy stands up, they just shut him down, close all his business. It's messianic reality. Jews didn't have that. We take this for granted. This is completely messianic. We never saw such a thing in the whole history of Judaism. We were just like defending ourselves the whole time. So anyway, the Rebbe saying it's because it's all good now. We're going to see things good. He's not saying it's all good. He's saying Hashem stand up and end the gullus. But even in the midst of this gullus, we're not going to see crazy, dramatic torture like we once did. And on the contrary, we are going to see fulfilled the notion that they're going to start serving us. The Isa Gemara, as it says in the Gemara, that actually it already took place. He brings the Gemara of Zvachim. I'll have to check it out. I told you I didn't have time to prepare that. But that such a thing already took place in the time of the Shas, that they were serving us. I have to look into it. I don't remember the sugya. This is exactly what I was just saying. That the kingdom, in other words, the government, helps the Jewish people fulfill their Torah mitzvahs. Right, and the Rebbe was mamish involved in that. Like America made the Rebbe's birthday, Yud Aleph Nisan, into National Education Day, and they would write him and invite him and give him honors and accolades. They printed a coin with his picture on it. Right, like it's crazy how much honor they gave to Torah mitzvahs. And the Rebbe says even when you're going to think that you're going to imagine rather that there's some kind of a bilbul, that some kind of a confusion, like it's not going our way. Go in the way of Avram Avinu, the first Jew, that when he saw a river standing in the way of fulfilling the mitzvah of Hashem, right? You know the story, he was on the way to the Akedah, and the Satan basically appeared in the form of a river, and he was like, I can't get to the mountain, so he just walked right in, and he up to his nose, and the river disappeared. So the Rebbe says, when you see something that looks like it's stopping you from doing Torah mitzvahs, even today, when they're helping us and everything, be like the first Jew. Avram Avinu, he saw a river, Amad Batokef Elul Nispal, he just stood up to it and didn't get affected at all. He didn't even think twice about it. Not shedding a tear, just go continue with your work. And then it came out that there was no opposition to Judaism, actually. It was a complete imagination. He says, nevertheless, any scenario of Golas, in whatever type of way that it is, even if it's an imagined one, Sarah, it's still pain. And the request is, Hashem is saying, The Rebbe is saying, fulfill that which we ask in Alanisim, that you stood up for them in the time of their pain, and we're still in pain, whatever type of pain it is. It's not the same pain of the old days, but it's pain. The Kevin Shebechol Tzarasim Lo Tsar. And since whenever the Jews are in pain, Hashem is in pain, and certainly Hashem is going to immediately take us out of the gullus. As it says, it says Hashem will return your captive, but it doesn't say return. It says He Himself will return with your captive, meaning like we learned in the Maimer, He's going to come from 770, etc. To the point that we're going to come with Hashem to the Beis HaMikdash, praising and saying Hallel to His great name. We're going to light the menorah in your holy courtyard in the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. Mikdash Hashem konu yadecha. Mikdash Hashem will establish. Okay, so